In this video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the statistical and mathematical functions that are built into MySQL. And MySQL has over 30 of these mathematical functions, but there are a number of repeats. I'm going to be placing a link here to a reference page that you can visit and take a look at all the functions. I won't have time to go through all of them here. Okay, and I'm going to be using the Scikila database, which is a sample database that comes with MySQL. If you don't have it installed, I'm going to be putting a link to the GitHub repository to install it in the description for this video. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm going to first use Scikila. Okay, and often enough, we just want to see a simple count of how many rows. Okay, and to familiarize ourselves with what tables are available in Scikila, I'm going to use show tables. Okay, so we can see there are 23 tables here. All right, and it's supposed to be a movie rental business. All right, and I'm going to be using statistics on this film table. So we'll go ahead and get started. And you know, you start off just the same way you would for any basic query, and it's going to start with select, and then instead of a column, I'm going to put the function that I'm interested in, and it's going to be a count. I'm going to put the asterisk in here. Now, you could count a specific column if you wanted, all right, but often enough, it's easiest just to count everything. We're going to get it from film, and then we're going to limit our results to where the film rating is R. We'll go ahead and run that, and we can see that there are 195 that meet that criteria. Okay, so we can take this a step farther, and we can see the counts for all of the ratings in this table. So we'll start with select. Now we'll add the rating column, and then a count. And once again, we'll count everything, and it's going to be from film. Okay, and instead of using a where clause, we're going to use the group by clause here that allows us to aggregate data. All right, and then we'll group it by the column we want to display. Okay, so these are presented actually in the order of which they appear in the table. Okay, so if we want to sort them, we'll end with an order by clause. All right, so there are other statistics we can get. We can get a max. So once again, we start with our select, we add our statistic, and then we can get the, say, max length of a film, all right, from the film table. Okay, so we see the maximum is just over 3 hours there. All right, and I'll just note here that if I put in the title next to max, I will not get the title that has the maximum length. Okay, so it's a slightly more complex query, and I'm not going to cover it here, all right, because it requires to write a subquery, all right, but just kind of note that, kind of a rookie mistake to put in multiple columns here alongside this max or other sort of statistical functions and expect that, okay, they are related, and when they're not. This is actually the first movie in that film table, all right, and so just so you can see what I'm talking about here, I'll get the title and the length, all right, from film. Okay, so there it is, and there's that Academy dinosaur, and it's really only 86 minutes long. Okay, so just sort of watch out for that mistake. Okay, so we can also do things like take a look at the average length, all right, and then maybe the standard deviation, and this is another little sort of got you. There are 4 functions for calculating standard deviation built in here, and the 3 that I have listed up here, although I spelt them wrong, all right, all calculate the same thing, and it's a standard deviation for a population. And, you know, often enough, we are probably working with samples, all right? All right, typically we'd be working with a sample and not one from a population. So just another thing to sort of watch out for when you're working with this data. You're going to get slightly different answers based on what function you use in this case. All right, so we'll look for movies where the rating is R. Okay, and so there it is. And so just to give you an idea of how different the answer might be if I was working with a population, I will use one of the other 3 standard deviation calculations. All right, and we can see it's just a little bit smaller. All right, so not a big difference here. All right, 38.5 versus 38.4. Okay, but still it may be important depending on what you're working with. Okay, another thing is that we notice that the column names I have here take on the name of the function that I typed in. And so if I want to change that, I can add an alias. And I use the keyword as to do that. All right, so I can do mean, and as long as it's a single word, I don't need to use quotation marks. All right, and these are effectively new columns in your temporary table that you create when you run a query. All right, so there they are. And then I could use them further if I needed to. All right, so I could refer to now these column names if I want to do something else with them. Okay, so we'll do a similar calculation that we did before with the counts, and then we'll group them by the average. So I'll just start with this, and I guess I'll leave the standard deviation on there. And then we'll remove this where criteria, and we'll instead replace it with order by, we'll replace it with group by, and we will group by the rating. All right, and I'll add rating also to the result set, although I don't need to. And then probably we'll sort, and let's sort by the mean, all right, in descending order. If I hadn't given it an alias, I would have had to sort by the average length in descending order. All right, let's try this one. Okay, and there they are with the longest movies shown first. And if that's a little bit too much precision, right, and it probably is, right, we can just limit that by using the round function. All right, and probably for the minutes, we don't need any decimal places, and maybe we need 1 or 2 for the standard deviation. Okay, so the last one I'm going to show you here in terms of statistics. I mean, there's basic statistics, average, standard deviation, min, max, count. All right, there's also the sum. All right, and there's nothing really to sum here. So I am going to sum the amount, all right, and I'm going to get that from the payment table. All right, so basically what we're doing is totaling all of the payments we've received. Okay, so it looks like 67,000 here roughly. All right, and then yes, I can do things like if there's a date in that table, I can group it by a month, all right, and then, see how the revenue breaks out over the different months if I want to. Okay, and I would do that, the same way that I showed you above with group by. All right, I'll just run through a couple more mathematical functions here. All right, there is a random function, all right, that gives us a random number between 0 and 1, so that can sometimes be useful. All right, and you can see I don't have to refer to a table at all if I'm just using mathematical functions. All right, but I would usually use them in conjunction with some of the query that I'm running. All right, let's take a look at a couple more. Okay, we can get the square root of a number that I put in here, all right, and there's a number of built-in constants, so there's pi, all right, there is Euler's constant, all right, so if we need to do financial calculations, things like that, they're in here as well. Okay, so once again, if you want to look at more of the mathematical functions that are available in MySQL, you can visit this hyperlink here, and I hope that helps you get started with statistics and MySQL.